Yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 182 News Podcast. This is your host, Poppin' Curbs, and I really appreciate you making me a part of your day. I really hope you enjoyed the last episode. That was the Terminal Radness interview, aka Nick Gensler. So it was really cool to hear his journey as an artist. He was a Blink fan growing up to the point of where he actually handed Mark his demo tape when he was younger. Mark waited 30 minutes for him and his buddy to go grab their demo tape out of their car. And this is when Mark was famous as fuck with Take Off Your Pants and Jacket tour already. So it was super cool to hear that. And then to think 20 years later, you know, you're making merch, t-shirts for Blink, posters for Blink, and Mark Hoppus digs your art enough to where he asks you to make a bass guitar for him that he's going to play in front of 20,000 people on an Enema of the State 20th anniversary tour. I mean, that is just fucking crazy. So it was really cool to hear that. I really hope you enjoyed that. Today's episode features a rad conversation with David Stowe of Vannen watches. So if you've seen some of the Blink watches that were released throughout the years, the Hi, My Name is Mark watches, most recently the Simple Creatures skateboard, that's Vannen watches. So it was really cool. I reached out to David and he was totally down to come on. It's cool to hear, you know, how he got into this, why the watches, what it means to him to collab with these artists, you know, why he wanted to make rad shit, collectibles for fans and stuff like that. So really cool conversation. I hope you enjoy it. It will be coming up shortly. As far as the news goes, a couple things here. Mark tweeted out that he is bringing, quote unquote, She Said to LP10 in a big way. So the running joke is that Mark and Blink use she said, that phrase, way too often. You are pathetic. I knew when she said it. I'll write you once a week, she said, etc. They've used it quite a few times, but this is Mark poking fun at himself, which is funny. The good news, the big news here is he mentions LP10. So that means he's looking forward to another Blink album. And so that's pretty much confirmation. We're going to get a new Blink album at some point, which we figured that was going to happen, but it's always cool to hear it. There is a new Blink song coming out. So huge news. Travis tweeted out an interview with Spin Magazine the other day. I was reading through it, and all of a sudden, just casually in there, it's like, oh yeah, Blink has a new song called Quarantine dropping within the next 2 weeks. My heart just stops for a second. I'm like, oh shit, is this for real? So yeah, Blink 182 has a new song that is going to be dropping any day now. So as of now, I'm recording this on Sunday. It is not out yet, but the song is called Quarantine, and it's supposed to be coming out within the next 2 weeks. So it's awesome that they were still able to collab while everybody's still kind of on lockdown. Totally looking forward to this. It is produced by Travis and Brian Lee. So if you watch that Nirvana tribute that Travis and Post Malone did, Brian is actually the dude that was playing bass during that. So it's super cool. Somebody asked Mark, you know, how to describe the new song, and he said he thinks old school Blink fans will like it. So I'm anxious to hear how it goes. Looking forward to that, and, you know, we'll talk about it whenever it drops on future pods. But yeah, that's the big news. Within the next 2 weeks, new Blink. Mark also has basically confirmed at this point that 9 Deluxe is a thing. It is going to happen at some point. So they had quite a bit of material left over, similar to the California days where they had a ton of material for it. And so I'm anxious to see what comes of that. I do think we will get 9 Deluxe sooner than later. And obviously, while everybody's kind of stuck at home right now, they aren't able to tour, it would be a great time to release that, you know, halfway soon. So I do think that will happen. Obviously, looking forward to that. On Friday, we had a couple drops from the dudes. So Blink-182 was featured on a song by Pow Fu called Deathbed. It was a bonus remix. So it was cool to have, you know, anything new from the dudes coming out. That was dope to see pull up. I see people bitching about some of these features sometimes. I just don't understand it. Like, even if it's not your genre, even if you don't dig the song or know the artist, it's all good. It doesn't matter. The thing is, a lot of these younger cats are heavily inspired by Blink, grew up huge fans. So this is just Mark or Travis or any of them being asked to be featured on a song, them being cool enough enough to do it. And the thing is it's more for that artist fan base. This isn't a Blink song featuring this dude. This is that dude's music. And Mark was kind enough to hop on. Travis kind enough to hop on. So it's just cool. And the thing is, if it brings, one of that dude's fans to know Blink or dive into Blink's discography, then it's all worth it for me. So, I mean, it's just really cool. I don't understand the bitching on this. I dig it. Yeah, it's different, but it should be. It's a different band. It's a different dude. I've never heard of him. It's not that big of a deal. The other drop that happened on Friday, Travis dropped a song with Wiz Khalifa called Drums, Drums, Drums. I totally dig Wiz. I'm all about hip-hop, rap. I've been all about Travis's hip-hop ventures and side ventures for a long time. Wiz Khalifa, actually, when I was in college, he was just coming up. One of my buddies, he was coming in town to play a frat party, and one of my buddies had to pick him up at the airport, which is crazy. And the funny thing is, Wiz told my buddy to take them straight to the mall. And he said, all right, we're about to buy a bunch of shit and we just want you to film it. So my buddy just randomly got asked to pick up Wiz. I think he was the only one with a car. Goes and picks up Wiz from the airport and then just has to film him and his buddies buying a bunch of shit from the mall, which is just clowning. So yeah, Wiz is dope. It's obviously cool to see Travis collabing with a huge artist like that. It has in the past. And I'm telling you, man, the DTA record stuff is going to be big. Travis can collab with anybody. I guarantee you he has tons of sick artists lined up wanting to work with him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Travis does with that. The song is fire. It's called Drums, Drums, Drums. Also, Travis is supposedly working with new shit with Post Malone, so I think people will be looking forward to that. That's going to be dope as well. Okay, so as far as the news goes, that's about all I have for today. I want to get into this conversation with David Stowe of Vannen Watches. So this is another lengthy conversation. It's really rad. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to give you this one in full again. If it's a 2 to 3 hour interview, I'm probably going to have to split these up, but I'm okay for now going with the hour and a half ones in one episode. I think people are digging that. So especially, I've mentioned this before, I'm trying to get these out every 2 weeks as long as I have time. So I'm trying my best here. So if you have a second, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. I know it sucks. I know everybody says it and it's annoying, but I really appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback. I'm just doing this in my very little spare time out of passion for Blink, just trying to do rad shit for the fan base. So if you can leave me a review, I would really appreciate it. If you need to hit me up, I am at Poppin' Curbs on Twitter and Instagram. Would love to hear from you. Would love to say what up. So, all right. In the meantime, let's jump into this conversation with David Stowe. I really hope you enjoy it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now joining us on the 182 News podcast, David Stowe of Vannen Watches. David, what's up, dude?
Hey, Ben. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good, man. I got my first haircut today for the first time in like 3 months, so I'm feeling great.
Haircuts, yeah. I haven't had a haircut in a while. I mean, like, this gets trimmed a little bit, but none of nothing like that. So I envy you. There's a lot of pressure when you have hair to maintain haircuts because you're just like, oh man, it's just off a little bit, and then you kind of stress. Yeah,
I agree. And I've been working from home, so you can rock a hat, or it doesn't matter what it looks like. But then I've been having to go into work. I'm in Indiana, by the way, and we're starting to kind of crank up, phase one of returning to the real world or normalcy or whatever. And so I had to go into work and I'm like, oh, I look like shit. I don't know what's happening, but yeah, so doing all right, man. Appreciate you taking time to hop on the podcast. Really cool. So for the listeners who don't know, Vannen Watches, rad company. They've done some really cool collabs with really a ton of awesome artists, Against Me, All Time Low, Bad Religion, Blink, of course, Simple Creatures. So we're going to get into those. But to get started, I kind of want to get an idea of your background, where you're from, how'd you get into this kind of thing, the art, was it graphic design, stuff like that? Just kind of give the listeners an idea of, how you got to where you are and creating this company.
Vannen started, the idea of it came about in the, I want to say, early 2000s. I I was always a fan of Swatch and what they did with pop culture, art, and fashion and music in the 80s and 90s. And there was a moment in the late 90s, early 2000s where I noticed they weren't really doing any kind of, counterculture stuff or kind of anything like over there on that side. And one day I was just like, man, it'd be really cool if they, did this or that. And I was like, there's no way they'll ever do it. And it wouldn't be cool if there was this kind of other version, this kind of, this anti-Swatch, if you would. And that was always in the back of my mind. And as I kind of lived and ruminated on the idea of sitting in traffic in LA, and I was kind of miserable with my job, and I realized, well, life had kind of put me in this really interesting place where I knew all these artists and designers and bands, and I had money in my savings, and it was a weird time. And I just had this epiphany, like, just do it myself. And that's kind of where it started, out of just the universe putting everything in alignment for me, and then being unhappy with the day job, and then just saying, you know what, I have the means to make a difference and change my life and do something. And then that's how it started. But yeah, that's when it really began. But like I said, it all started with collecting Swatch in the 80s and the 90s. So
yeah. So did you go to school like for graphic design, or were you kind of an artist by nature, constantly, either collecting or just trying to come up with cool shit? Like, how did you even kind of get in this stratosphere of really cool collectibles, pop culture, art, music, stuff like that?
So yeah, I grew up on comic books and music, and being aware of design just kind of intuitively. And then I went to school for design in South Carolina, and then finished that up, and that gave me the ability to know how to use a computer, and to know, because I was always drawing and creating graphics and doing stuff on my skateboards and making art at school and things like that, and drawing for other people. But when I finally finished school and had the know how to use a computer, I was only able to elevate my skill set. So being a designer by trade, that helped me when having my own company and learning, helping people with design, or helping them with their packaging or their watches, or, t-shirt layouts or things like that. So it's helped a lot, and it's been really useful because I'm able to communicate with those people. And yeah, so I started out as a designer, went into web development for a while, left web development 10, 12 years ago, and started this company, Vannen. Yeah.
Cool. Were you doing anything with bands before? I mean, were you even in the music scene before?
Yeah, good point. I did. Before I did my own company, I did a lot of packaging for bands. I did posters, packaging. What else did I do? 7-inch LPs, stuff like that.
Oh,
so I did. Cool. Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah. Yeah.
What were some of the most like notable bands you worked with at the time?
Drag the River would be the biggest one that I did. Drag the River. It's they were originally Armchair Martian, and as they kind of progressed as Armchair Martian, they started playing slower songs and more kind of Americana driven, just not really softer songs, but less aggressive. Against Me was very, not punk, but it was just very aggressive. It was like they sound like Husker Du, where it's kind of brash but beautiful songs. But as they got older, they kind of their sound kind of like changed a bit, and they got, like I said, softer and more cuddlier. And so I did a lot of stuff for Drag the River, and those were like the last bands that I worked on, was Drag the River, the last big band that I worked on. Everything else just smaller stuff on smaller labels for Suburban Home Records. And who else did I do? I'm trying to think. Man, that was so many years ago. That was a total blur. Threw me a curveball. Good job.
That's a cool band name, Armchair Martian. I'll have to check them out. I haven't heard.
Yeah, I think you would like them. They're really good. They're from they're part of the whole Blasting Room family. If you're familiar with the Blasting Room, that's where the Descendants and All record. And the Descendants and All have this really good, unique sonic sound for their guitars. And a lot of the bands that they record, they kind of have this similar sound, this kind of similar vibe. So if you like the Descendants, you'll like things like Armchair Martian and Hagfish and Shades Apart and Wretch Like Me, and there's countless other, even a lot of bigger bands that you're familiar with that have recorded their Face to Face, Propaganda, Rise Against, things like that. So they're all kind of part of this Blasting Room family. And Armchair Martian, they're a part of that scene. So yeah, cool. And I did stuff for Armchair Martian too. Yeah, I did stuff for them as well. It's so weird, man. My brain, like, I process so much stuff that it'll go in and go right out to make room for other stuff. And it's funny that you're talking about this. I'm like, oh yeah, I did do this. Oh, I did do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
just, yeah.
I don't remember shit that I did unless somebody, brings it up like I did. It's actually kind of sad, but that's all right. So one of the things that when I was reading kind of your mission statement, kind of the about Vannen watches that I just loved is the pro artist stance, a cycle of friends supporting friends. So, where did you kind of have that epiphany to make that your mission? What does that mean to you? Because I think that's just so fucking cool.
That's I think that this is a two-part answer. Coming from a skateboarding punk rock background, it's all about community and supporting each other. And I think that was already ingrained in what everything that I do. And I knew, like, if I was going to start this company, that the mission would have to be, working with friends, making friends through the project, through the projects, through the product, and just kind of having a sense of community with it. And not just be like, here's a product, here's a product. It's something fun for all of us.
Yeah.
And that came about because it's a lot of the bands that I work with. That's how bands and artists I work with. That's how they get more work and how they support each other, and that's working with their friends. So it was just this natural direction to run this company. It wasn't a motive. There wasn't an agenda. There wasn't like an idea to play on like sympathies or have a brand, like a marketing strategy. It was like, no, well, like, if you're going to do a company where you support people and you support each other, like, this is what it's about. This is what it should be about.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's how it came about. And the name Vannen is a Swedish word for friends or friend. And and it's really cool. Yeah.
That was going to be one of my questions is, what does Vannen mean? So that's cool. But were there any other like company names that almost made it?
Oh, good question. No one's ever asked that question before. Yeah, there was a really good list, and some of them I'll look back on and go, but what's really funny is Sean Cliver started a company recently called Strangelove, and that's what I was going to call my company, was Strangelove.
Really?
Yeah, because and I even told him when he made the name, I was like, dude, that was going to be my company name 10 years ago because of the same reasons you listed. Because making this thing that he was making, or what I was making, this thing together, was based on our love of strange stuff, whether it's music or art or pop culture things. It's strange love.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's so rad that someone kind of had that same angle or direction that I had with it too, and they used it. I had a couple other names that didn't happen, and they ended up being used for other companies, which was funny because now I look back, I'm like, I should have bought those domains and just sat on it. Like, been that asshole. Yeah, been that asshole sitting on the company name. One of them was Vaunt, VAUNT, and that was actually on some packaging I did for like the first couple of watches that we made as mock-ups, and then I didn't keep that name. Another one was Coterie, with a C, because that also means like a group of people with shared similar interest. And that actually ended up becoming, I think, a magazine or a makeup company years later. And
cool.
Vannen was the only thing there that really kind of had a good ring to it. And it was the only thing that was available: web domain, business domain. Everything was available for it as far as, getting the rights to it worldwide. So cool. That was one to go with. And all my friends they really loved that name. They thought it was a great name, and it popped really well. And then when we did the type treatment for it, it was like, okay, perfect. It looks great. Let's stick with that one.
It's perfect. It's dope. By the way, your mic's still kind of hitting your zipper if you're able to adjust that a tad. No, it's all right. It's just going to end up screeching for people on their headphones or whatever. But so, obviously you say you combine art, music, and pop culture. So, I mean, were those, I guess, your loves growing up? I mean, how did you decide to kind of intertwine those three things?
Yeah, I think growing up in the 80s as a latchkey kid, I mean, everything you entertained your with was kind of pop culture. It was like, television, cartoons, comic books, magazines, skateboarding, music, and that was my pop culture. Not really the popular culture of today, but that was my pop culture in my circle of friends, in our community. And that stuff is what, I'm still inspired by a lot of that stuff today, because there's still scenes and cultures in those scenes kind of creating and making new stuff. So
yeah. What is your, by the way, what's your favorite comic book? Just out of curiosity.
My favorite comic book of all, when I growing up, I was huge. I liked Captain America a lot and Thor. I was a big Marvel person. Captain America, Thor, and X-Men. And recently I just finished up the Eternals because I was curious to see how that's going to turn into the movies. Watchmen is probably my all-time favorite as far as social commentary and it being dark and deep and well written.
Great.
Not that other comics aren't well written, but Watchmen is heavy stuff. And if you're not expecting that ending, you're like, oh shit. Yeah. And then once you finish it, and you look back on all the parallels with the Black Freighter and all the other side stories, and you realize that they're all related. It's all relative to the main story of what's going on, and you're like, oh man, that's some heavy stuff. So Watchmen Watchmen's my favorite of all time. But as a kid, it was Captain America, Thor, Doctor Strange, X-Men. And I'm just getting back into comics because I just need some other cool stuff to read. So
I kind of am too. I went through that like 4 or 5 years ago. That's why I asked. So, obviously I want to get in a little bit later about some of the clients you've worked with, and Walking Dead is one of them. So I ended up reading all of those, which was great. And I'm a little bit behind you, where I'm kind of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle nerd. So awesome. I've been reading all of those, and that was kind of my childhood. So it's been really cool to read that new series, by the way. So, all right. So at what point do you decide, I need to collaborate with artists, and then how do you even begin to kind of form that relationship?
Well, the collaborating with artist stuff was phase one of the company. It was like, let's do artist watches first. I need to do a certain rollout. So the rollout is let's do artists. When I moved to LA, I was friends with a popular artist here in town at the time. He introduced me to a lot of people. I became friends with all these people through him, and I had already known a couple of other artists that were pretty popular at the time. So when I came up with the idea of starting the company, I knew like, okay, I'm going to work with my buddy at the time who introduced me to the Oz people. I'm going to talk to the people that I met through him that are really cool, that I have a good relationship with, talk to them about it, and then also go to my other friends that are artists. And that's kind of how the artist stuff started. And then I knew that, okay, the artist stuff is going to lead into artists with bands, artists with properties, like, whatever. And then I'll probably get in positions where I'll have to do just, artwork that the band has ready for a record, or artwork that The Walking Dead already has for their watch, or artwork that this TV show has, or whatever, So the artist thing was just me working with them because I love their art, and also having a team of people to go ahead and launch this brand, and also do it so we can say, hey, there's this new thing out there. Because at the time, people were only doing, a lot of these new companies at the time were only doing T-shirts and toys, and no one's really doing watches. And some of the T-shirts and toys that were coming out for these artists looked kind of terrible, and they were getting screwed over money-wise. So I knew that if we did this watches, it was a functional collectible that people could, take on the street. They could wear. It's a conversation piece. It's a functional collectible. Anyway, so they were more hyped about it because it's something someone could wear more frequently, because you can only wear your T-shirt once a day or every other day, and then people just think you're weird. So if it's the same shirt, so they were all really stoked to get behind it, and I think it was because they knew that I would make a good product, and they knew I would have their best interest in mind, and that it was, the money would be great, and that we were all doing it for each other, in that same vein of the thing that we were talking about, doing it for each other and supporting our community. And that's how the artist side of it came about. But it was hard though, because the artist stuff, and I learned this over the years, is that if the art isn't attached to something that people have an emotion to or a connection to, it's hard to resonate with them. It's hard to introduce people to new characters or new motifs or new environments or new things. Yeah. It's hard for people to have emotions to something they know nothing about. So the artist watches were kind of a labor of love. And but I knew that that they looked good and people would like them if they found them, and it did great. And then the bands and the other stuff came along, which were properties and things like that, other intellectual properties.
Yeah. How did you first decide, like, I'm going to focus on watches? Like, were you a big watch fan
Yeah.
growing up, and like the ones you had, you just didn't do it for you? Like, how did you decide on that?
Yeah. So grew up in the 80s, loving what Swatch did. And there was a moment in the 90s where they just dropped the ball. And I stopped buying because I was just like, well, during the 80s and 90s, I was skateboarding and I always wore watches. And I didn't like anything heavy. I always liked a lightweight plastic watch, and I always wore Swatch because it was just you don't even feel it on your wrist. So when I was going to do the watch company, I knew, like, okay, I like the plastic platform. I like that it's lightweight, and I'm just going to emulate what Swatch did. And and I don't mean like emulate, like steal their idea. It's just I loved what they did, and there was no one doing. They weren't touching anything that I was interested in at the time, and I knew no one else was going to do it, and they weren't going to do it. And if I didn't do it, or if I did never, life didn't put me to that place, it would never get done properly. So
Yeah.
the watches were always something I was into because I enjoyed wearing them. I enjoyed, the design, the exclusivity, them being a limited edition. And then when it came time to make them, it's like I wanted to do that same thing. Not necessarily because that's what they did, but it's because that's what I find fun about collecting and making stuff, and also keeping it affordable. So.
Yeah.
That's kind of what got me closer to doing it. It's like I didn't want to make toys. I didn't want to make T-shirts. I didn't want to make posters. All that stuff is, I don't want to say it's easy. It's just that everybody can do it. Yeah. Doing watches is something that you can do it, and people have tried, but it takes a lot of work and it's really expensive. And if you don't do it right, it's just, you're not going to be around that long. And yeah, so that's why I chose watches. It's funny because it almost sounds like I took the hard way. I took the hard way, but I took the way that I wanted to go with the product that I wanted to make, because I knew there was just so much other crap out there. And yeah, so the watches was because I was a fan of Swatch, and because that's what I wanted. I made what I wanted, essentially. Yeah. And that's what I continue to do with the watches as a fan of Blink and all the other bands I work with. It's like I want to make the stuff that I'm a fan of.
Yeah, that's dope. And one of the things that I just love about pretty much everything you put out is not only is it a functional piece, but it's also a collectible. And so as a hardcore collector myself, I just think that's so fucking cool because, and I try to tell this to, I work with kind of a lot of, athletes and stuff with social media and digital marketing, kind of stuff like that. And I try to tell people, I'm like, make limited edition dope shit. Like, that's what I want. So that's what a lot of people want. I mean, people like collecting dope shit, especially, in the Blink world. There's tons of hardcore collectors, and I'm sure each band kind of has their own thing. But was that something that was very much, I guess, important to you to make it not only just a dope watch, but something that is a collectible in a sense, like straight down to the packaging?
Yeah. To kind of chime in on what you said about working the people you work with and telling them to make limited edition stuff, it's so hard for some people to think in that mindset. A lot of people, they can only think, okay, we need to make a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I work with people today that are still like that. That are like, why aren't we making 1,000 of those? And I'm like, because no one wants that. I mean, people will buy 200 of them or 300 or 400, but then we're left with 600, and then that kind of you won't be able to move them, and the value or the perceived value of them just makes it rubbish. So it's hard to convince people to do limited on your side, on my side, because some people they don't understand that you have to keep it limited to kind of keep the collectability fun and engaging, because no one wants to buy anything that's there's 1,000 pieces of or 2,000 pieces of or something that you can get every day. No one wants to buy that. I don't want to buy that.
Yeah, I'm not tempted at all.
Yeah. So no one's tempted to do that. So yeah, I mean, I always knew that as a collector growing up. Like when I bought certain Swatch watches or I bought certain skateboard decks, I knew certain skateboard decks would only be available a certain amount of time because there would be a new pro model that would come through, or I knew like a comic book would only be around for X amount of time, or an action figure would only be around for X amount of time, or like there was a moment where I was into vinyl toys and kaiju, and it's like, okay, I know that colorway. There's only 20 of them, and that's it. you know.
Yeah.
So everything that I love about collecting and how things were made that I appreciated is what I brought to my company. And that's what, and I know as a fan and as someone who makes stuff, makes product as a fan, I know people will still be, stoked about it because they know that I'm a fan and I'm making it for us.
Yeah.
Keeping them limited, keeping the packaging cool, and then doing fun stuff with the packaging, like, getting stuff autographed or including original art or drawings or things like that. So
Yeah, totally. And so it sounds like you just touched on some of it, but what are some of the big things that you've kind of collected over the years that, even going back to childhood, it sounds like the swatches and such, but was there any major collectibles that you were just all over?
Collectibles is a slippery slope.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know as blank collectors, like it just is a lot of stuff you can get, and especially with this variants. I had a moment in, God, when was it? Let's say early 2000s, where I got into Japanese vinyl kaiju, and it's really expensive, and I don't recommend it for anybody. It's a horrible. I'd rather have a heroin problem than collect Japanese vinyl, because Japanese vinyl is so expensive and it's limited and it's stressful. So I stopped collecting Japanese vinyl. So and I actually sold off my collection to help pay for Vannen. So yeah, there was a silver lining to it. But yeah, I mean, there was a moment where I was collecting toys and I never got into collecting vinyl records because I was aware. I'm a good addict. I'm aware of my problems, and I know, like, if I go down that route, I'll be in trouble. I was only into collecting toys for a moment, and what else did I collect? I had skateboard deck collection for a minute there. That's also a slippery slope. I don't recommend that for anybody because, like, you've got the Simple Creatures board right there behind you. It's like, imagine like 50 more of different decks. I mean, there's a whole room filled. And then it spills over to a living room and a staircase, and then it's everywhere. And it's just like, oh my God, you got a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't. Comic books, I had a big collection when I was younger, and I still have that. There's a lot of Silver Age comics in there from the 60s, which is rad, and some Golden Age stuff too, which is crazy. But yeah, I try not to buy much stuff nowadays. All my money goes into my company. And so, yeah, so I don't buy much of hardly anything now.
Yeah, comics, by the way, are such a pain in the ass to store. Like, you get those long boxes and they just sit there. You can never look at them and appreciate them. I'm just like, fuck, what do I do with these? There has to be a better way to display those somehow, because it just sucks. I'm surprised nobody's thought of something. But yeah, I found out a long time ago, you kind of have to narrow your focus of what you collect. I mean, I've collected so much shit throughout the years, but I'm a big autograph guy, so I've got tons of baseball autographs, and I had to kind of narrow that down.
So you have a baseball room for all your stuff?
Yeah, this room next to me is just so loaded with fucking autographs of random shit, and so then in Blink, there's people who try to get everything. I'm like, I can't get everything, so I've tried to focus my Blink collection on mostly autograph stuff, and part of why I do that, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I try to help collectors, making sure they're getting authentic signatures. I've documented the band's autographs throughout the years to kind of help people make sure they're getting real shit, because there is fake shit out there, which is...
Oh yeah, I've seen it on some of the boards where people try to pass signatures.
Yeah, it sucks, man. It fucking pisses me off so bad. But it's funny you mentioned that about like all the skateboards and shit on the wall, because I'm literally like out of wall space. Yeah. So now I've had to narrow my focus down to like just Blink signed CDs or like small things I can shove on my shelf, because I don't have any fucking room, man. Yeah. So by the way, I need to ask you, and we'll get to Simple Creatures in a minute, but part of what I mentioned about not only are your items functionable, but they're also dope collectibles. So I'm not going to skate or I'll break my fucking ankle, but I need to figure out a way to mount this puppy on the wall behind me. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, so I use these. What I do for my boards is that I use, there's a couple of ways, depending on what you want to do. So they're your picture frames. You can buy these gold hooks. They have like these, it's not like a standard nail. It's like a 2 to 3 prong hook system. These tiny nails. Hold on. I have one right here somewhere. Okay, I'm going to hold over to the camera. So these little hooks. Okay, you can find them at Home Depot or, just whatever places. And yeah,
Do those
This
line up perfectly with the holes?
Yeah, not really. So this little hook right here is just so DIY and ghetto. You just bend this guy right here, okay?
Yeah.
And then what I do for the top truck holes is I'll run a zip tie through the top truck hole, and then I just run the truck hole, the zip tie right over that top right
Oh
there. And it
yeah.
looks great. It's not it's if you don't mind seeing the zip tie at the top of the truck on this truck holes, it's
Yeah.
not a big deal. Some people splurge and they buy these wood block mounts, and then they have like some bolts coming out and they mount it that way. If you want to do
Yeah.
that, you can, but it's a little too heavy duty, especially if you're adding more boards. This little system is a little more non-committal, and you can just move it around as much as you want
Yeah.
as you add boards. So I recommend using something like that.
Yeah. I need to find that ASAP because I need to get that up on the wall for sure.
You can even use fishing line or kind of filament threading through the top truck holes and to just tie it up and hang it that way.
Okay.
Super easy. Yeah, super easy. And like I said, the best thing about this is that you can move it around.
Yeah.
And the nails that hold this thing in place are at a little bit of an angle. My forehead is the background so you can see. So they're at an angle, so they hold a lot of weight and they don't leave much damage on the wall when you pull them out. They're just tiny little holes. So
yeah, dope. Yeah, definitely. Where'd you get that? Like Home Depot or something?
Yeah, Home Depot, Lowe's. I think you can even find them at Walmart or Target in the picture frame section. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The skateboard stuff, yeah. Simple Creatures. Been making a lot of skateboards. I'm stoked to be doing it because I started doing skateboard decks. I didn't actually ever want to do skateboard decks because I thought there was too many of them out there. But then one day I saw a really horrible skateboard that a band made, and I was just like, okay, I've got to intervene. I got to start making boards now because this has to stop.
Yeah.
And that's why I started making boards, to be completely honest with you. And it goes back to that whole thing of why I started the watch company. If I don't do it, somebody else is going to get the idea, and it's going to be awful. This is going to be terrible quality, awful. And what's funny is when I started my company, a couple of people started trying to do it too. And I could tell that they just bought the cheapest watch they could find. And I was like, I'll see you guys in 6 months when you're out of business. They like handle this stuff, and I was like, oh man, you guys are not gonna make it. And what's funny is there's even some of my competitors are going out of business right now, and it's kind of rad to be the only other like kind of pop culture band artist, like I said, pop culture watch company out right now, aside from Swatch. There's one other one out there right now, but they're on the verge of going out of business because all their bad reviews are catching up to them, and kind of people are getting aware that, they make a shitty product.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, man. And I think anybody out there listening, if they're creating or making something, just, always have integrity and put your best work into whatever you're making, because that will be the difference between you and anybody else making something, because you can only sell a feeling or an emotion. That stuff eventually people will kind of get wise to, that they're just buying an emotion. They're not really buying quality. So so that's why I started making boards, man. There's too many crappy ones out there, and that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's super dope. Yeah, I mean, you've worked with quite a few clients, and this is funny when I'm reading over these. This is a good example of why there's enough Blink content to come up with a podcast. So get this. You've worked with Against Me, whose drummer is Adam Willard, who was in Angels and Airwaves with Tom, who also had a side project to Hell with Matt Skiba, who's now in Blink. You've worked with All Time Low, whose lead singer Alex Gaskarth is now in a side band Simple Creatures with Mark. You've worked with Aquabats, who Travis Barker was the original drummer for. You've worked with Bad Religion, who was supposed to be on a tour with Alkaline Trio right now. You've worked with Blink. You've worked with the Descendants, who are Tom and Mark's one of their favorite bands, inspirations. And you've worked with Rancid, who, Tim Armstrong, legend, worked with Travis Barker in a side band they had called The Transplants, as well as with Boxcar. It's so fucking crazy how these are all like connected to Blink in some way.
Well, I mean, that's just the whole punk. That's the whole SoCal punk rock scene, or California in general, or the punk rock scene in general. I mean, they're all homies. They all know each other. They're all kind of have some kind of relationship with each other. It's very incestuous, but that kind of goes back to the whole community thing where they have an admiration for each other's skill sets and their talent and their art, and that's why they kind of cross pollinate as they have over the years, because eventually they've all become admirers of each other's work, and they kind of go, okay, we work together. You're great. I'm going to play with you, and this person's great. I'm going to jump to that band, stuff like that. So
yeah, on the TV front, you've worked with Walking Dead, Outcast. That's a Robert Kirkman as well. One of my favorite shows of all time, Dexter. I mean, just fucking awesome. And then Invincible. That's one of the comics I need to read. I've heard it's amazing. It's Robert Kirkman as well.
Yeah, Invincible's, not to interrupt you, Invincible's really good. And if you did finish Walking Dead, there's a comic that Skybound put out called Manifest Destiny.
Okay.
And it's Lewis and Clark meets zombies. Okay. And it's amazing. And it's kind of an altered history take on their exploration of Manifest Destiny and them encountering all kinds of crazy stuff along the way. It's an amazing book, and it would make a great TV show, and I hope to God it happens one day. But if you have an appreciation for Walking Dead, or the history of Walking Dead, definitely check that out. Invincible comic. I have another TV show that I'm working on right now, and that's a little known sci-fi thing called Star Trek, which is
no big deal.
Next month, yeah. I think that Star Trek thing is going to be big one day. I've heard that they'll people be into it. It'll have
some people like that.
Yeah, some people like that Star Trek thing. So so it's cool. That one just popped up, and I've got another TV show I'm working on right now that I can't really talk about, but Star Trek's the next one. The other TV show that's going to be happening is really cool, and then that's it for TV stuff for now. Dexter was great. That was a fun one to work on. The Walking Dead was great. Those guys were amazing, and it was really cool to be a part of their whole kind of their pop culture, or their kind of moment that they had with the world, where I was one of their, I wouldn't say, sorry, when I say I sometimes mean the company, like the watches were one of their first pieces of merchandise. And when The Walking Dead came out and that was the thing, I mean, it just blew up. It was the craziest thing ever. They didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming. And even the same thing with the Breaking Bad watch that we did. Like, we didn't see that. It was bananas. The Breaking Bad watch was rad. That one was great. Walking Dead was great. Yeah, it's fun to have a conversation about this, because sometimes I forget all the cool stuff that I got to work on.
Yeah, man.
That stuff. And Star Trek is going to be really cool. I'm excited for people to see that.
Yeah, that'll be dope. So lead us up to, how you first get asked to work with Blink 182. First off, like, did you know the dudes before? Did you like Blink? What's kind of your history with Blink before collabing with them?
Hate those guys. They're the worst. Terrible band. No.
Pure assholes.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the fans would agree. They're like, fuck that band. No, it all actually started with Dylan, who you just talked to recently. I met Dylan, I want to say in 2012 or 2013. I met him through a friend of mine who's an artist named Brian Ewing, who's done a couple of Blink posters. Met Brian. Brian was doing a mural at the Atticus shop on Melrose, and I went over to help Brian with a mural. Dylan and I became buddies, and he hasn't been able to shake me since. And I met Mark through Dylan, and back to Atticus. We did a watch. We, as in Vannen, did a watch for Atticus with Brian Ewing, the poster artist, and then I think Dylan had talked to Mark about doing watches, and then Chris T-Cert came along, and then I think we finalized the first watch. The first watch, El Conejo, I think is what it was called. Finalized that first watch through him. And that was the first one. Yeah. So it was, the relationship started with Dylan, met Mark, and then Chris took over for the first set of Blink watches. Yeah, that's how it was.
Dope. Yeah, I need to see a picture of that Atticus one. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it was when we were doing smaller watches. These they were smaller. I don't want to say they were like kid sizes, but they were smaller, and I thought they were a fine platform, but they were just tiny. They were just much smaller. They weren't good unisex watches, but I'll send you a photo of it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you come across like cool prototypes or something related to that, and are okay with us sharing it, send it my way. I'd love to post it on the Blink 182 online social media accounts, kind of tied in with the podcast. Be kind of dope. Cool, man. So yeah, you put out a couple watches with Blink. You've also worked with the Hi, My Name is Mark. That's Dylan as well. So is that collab process pretty much the same? You're kind of working back and forth with Dylan. Like, how does that even start? Do they just shoot you an email and say, "Yo, we want to watch in 2 months"? Black and white. Let's see what we can
No,
do.
it's usually just me emailing and begging for money. No, it's one of those things where we usually do a watch once a year with them. It's just out of tradition. And depending on what kind of colors I'm working on or ideas that we have, that's what we'll submit. I'll submit it, or Dylan will put a bug in their ear, Sky or Mark, and say, "Hey, let's do a thing." And that's how that stuff usually comes about. And we have there's another Hi, My Name is Mark watch coming out in a couple of months, so that's kind of cool. It'll be super limited. I think there's only 100. So
Sick.
yeah, that'll be fun. I'm wrapping that up as we speak, and then yeah, so it's just an email or a phone call and saying, "Hey, what's up? What are we working on? And do you want to do anything?" That's it, really.
Do you get the sense that Mark has like much say or input or cares much about like the design? Is he in there? Is it mostly just kind of Dylan and trusting Dylan with that aspect?
No, Mark and Sky are very much involved in everything. Everything goes through them. Yeah, and he sees the stuff. Sky and Mark see the stuff that I turn into them for consideration, and they'll either say yes or no. I mean, even with the thing that's coming out, there was, it's they're very aware of what looks good, what doesn't look good, or what works or what doesn't. But as a fan and as a friend, I try to create something that I would want to wear for them, that I would wear as a fan for them, as their brand, whether it's Blink or Hi, My Name is Mark. So in most cases, it's usually like, "Hey, let's try a different hand color, or let's try a different, dial color or something like that, or let's try this with the box," just out of like, curiosity and playfulness. But for the most part, we usually stick with what we got. But no, they're great to collaborate with. I'm very, very fortunate to have a relationship with them, and they're so cool. They're the best people ever.
Yeah, a lot of people, I hear that from a lot of people. It's just so cool. I mean, obviously, it's a Blink podcast, so people are interested to kind of hear what they're like, off stage or off camera, stuff like that. So that's really neat.
I never had a relationship with Tom or Travis. I've only had a relationship with Mark, and he is a generous dude with his time. And he's always been available to help out with stuff when it comes to like autographing things, and even autographs for Simple Creatures, super accessible. And even when Vannen and Hi, My Name is Mark did the Descendants documentary screenings back in the day, he was there for all the Q&As. He hosted a few of them, and he even hosted the last one that we did for the rap, where we had the band play and all this stuff, and he was there. So I mean, he's a really good dude, and I think he gets it because he came from suburban punk rock scene, where that community in San Diego, they all had to like work together and support each other, and their friends supported them, and I think that's why he's such a cool dude and so accessible, because he gets it. He understands, like he understands it. He gets it.
So let's get into the Simple Creatures board. So how does that process even start? Did they reach out? Does Mark reach out and say, "We want to do a skate deck"? Is this you, like you said, begging them to collab? How does that even get started?
So through my relationship with Dylan and Mark, I've also become buddies with their management. And through the management company, we have a rapport, and they were the ones that said, "Hey, do you want to do a watch for Simple Creatures?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do a watch." Did the watch, and it just didn't really go anywhere because it was just the only thing I had to work with was the type treatment and the fangs, the fangs. Yeah. That's it. And I did my best with it. It looked pretty good based on those two elements, and it was okay. And I just don't think it's not that it didn't get approved. It just didn't move anywhere. And then I started playing around with, skateboard designs, because I was like, I know I could do something with that. And then I showed them those designs, and I think Mark and Alex were like, "Oh, that one right there." And then that's the one you have. And that's how that came about. Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. There, and that would actually be another thing. If you happen to have like prototypes that you're making, that'd be interesting to see like your different versions of that.
I don't want to show you. I wouldn't want to show you the watch because it's nothing special. But I'll show you. I'll show you the other variants of that board, like the
That'd be dope.
the other layouts.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, and then again, Mark was really cool about signing those, and Alex was super cool. Alex was in the middle of moving, and I just went over to his house, set up a table, we banged it out, we were done. And you know, again, I think it's because those guys, you know, they love their fans, and then they also understand that, you know, it's a community, and let's keep things fun. You know, and that goes back to your argument with the people that you work with. You're like, let's do limited, let's do fun stuff. You know, they get it. You know, they come from that and they understand it. So
yeah. So as far as like design goes, I mean, are you the one primarily doing all of it? Do you have a team? You know, who's designing the watches? Who's designing the skate decks? Is that all you?
Not 100%. Sometimes other people get involved depending on what it is, but if things need to move faster, I'll get involved and do it and do the layouts and just bang stuff out quickly. Sometimes we'll get art that comes in and it's not really to a place, and the artist is frustrated and they're kind of giving up. I'll get in there and kind of move things around and kind of help them get to their breakthrough moment. Designing for a watch is really tough. It's a difficult experience because a lot of designers are only used to, you know, designing for a square or a rectangle, that being a post. And even then, sometimes they struggle with composition on a square surface where, you know, the composition being, you know, the balance, the depth of field, and they struggle with that. So taking an artist that's really good at poster design and getting them to design for a watch or a packaging is really tough because they have to think in 3 dimension. And what I always try to tell them is just design your poster, and then imagining it being folded in four parts. And then, you know, the front of your poster is the front panel. And then whatever you created spills over to the left side and the right side and wraps around. And then you've got this 3-dimensional poster. And that usually helps. But when it comes to the watch, it's really tough because a lot of artists will just throw something in the middle, which is the dial, also known as the face of the watch. Imagine like an automobile, you would call the front end, you know, of the car, the front end, because it's the grill, it's the hood, it's the, you know, the bumper, that stuff like that. So the face of the watch is the crystal, the dial, the hands, all that. So what's there up front, what's facing you. There you go. But most times when artists get involved doing a watch, they just throw something on the dial, and that's your primary focus, and then everything else is kind of an afterthought. And that's the hardest part because I'll do everything in my power to kind of get them to understand, like, okay, work from either the bottom up or the top down or the middle outward, but make it dynamic. Make it dynamic. And that's the hardest part. And that's and sometimes if I'm working with an artist and they just throw a graphic in the middle and the straps are just an afterthought, I'll try to get in there and push things around and then send it back to them and say, hey, what if we add this or that? And then that helps them get to their aha moment where they're like, oh, I see it now. I've gotten into horrible arguments with artists over design, just trying to get them to that breakthrough moment. And what I try to preemptively warn artists about is like, look, I'm going to be with you on this journey as a producer. I'm not asking you to make changes. I'm not asking you to, do stuff because I'm changing my mind. I'm going to get you to kind of have your breakthrough moment where you see it. It's kind of like people learning how to take a photograph for the first time. There's composition. There's rule of thirds. You're either on the left of the frame, the right of the frame, or in the middle. And there's also depth of field. You're either in the foreground, midground, or background. And like I said earlier about poster artists, some people don't have that, and they just intuitively know how to design for a poster. But when it's coming to that watch, I have to kind of. I was actually just about to say learn them. I have to teach them how to. That's my Southern coming out. Got to learn them. I have to teach them how to like understand depth of field on a watch. And you've probably seen it on some skateboard designs and poster designs where you're like, that just looks off. Where like this just doesn't feel balance is right. And so that's the biggest problem I have with, some watches, and why I take it over myself sometimes. And then sometimes there's nothing to work with. There's maybe just a logo. Simple Creatures is a great example. And it's like, I just had the fangs and the text. And when I was doing that watch, it was like, okay, how can I make this dynamic? And I thought what they did was dynamic, but I just doesn't think it was dynamic enough. So I'm kind of glad we didn't release it, because it could have been one of those things where it was like, it just wasn't done with the purest of heart. And so, yeah, so I do get involved when there's not a lot to work with, or there's too much going on and the artist just doesn't know how to get to that moment where they have, their breakthrough.
Yeah.
It's not an easy task, man. There's been times where I wanted to quit, because I'm like, I just can't have another argument with an artist because they don't get it. Yeah. It's probably similar to a director trying to direct actors. And like, okay, this is your motivation. You've been abused all your life, and you're tired of taking shit, and you're going to stand up for yourself. That's kind of what it's like with these people. But when we have a moment and the watch is done, and it comes out looking great, the artist always is like, sorry, David, I apologize for being a pain in the ass. You're right. It looks good. And that's when, I know that they're stoked and they had their breakthrough moment. And the watch that we have coming out for Star Trek is an artist watch, and it's so rad. It's everything I would ever wanted from a Star Trek watch, and I'm so stoked for people to see it. And it's really, really cool. I'm excited about that. And that's an artist watch, and working on that artist watch right there reinstilled my faith in working with artists again. The guy that did it, he was just like, yeah, cool, I get it, let's do it, boom, boom, and he got it. He was like, this is amazing. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
So yeah, it's a little bit of artist, a little bit of me, and if we're in a time crunch, it's all me. So
yeah, it's super interesting to kind of hear how that's kind of the best way to put it, almost like a producer. I would never have thought about that perspective, as almost like coaching these artists along to kind of bring out the best in them to make like the dopest watch you can make. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a tough process, man. It's funny when we were talking earlier about I could have made T-shirts or posters. There's sometimes that I'm like, I should have made T-shirts and posters. That would have been so much easier than doing watches. But when the product is finished and it's dynamic and three-dimensional, and people are just, they're spinning the box around, and they're taking the watch out, and they're looking at all the details, and then I know like it was done right. You know, and people are stoked on it. So,
and what's hard is it's one of those things. I even do it. I even notice it on mine. Like if I'm tinkering around with graphics and such, it's like you almost don't know it until you see it sometimes. Like I'll just stare at something and just tweak it. Like that's not it. That's not it. And then all of a sudden, boom, that's it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be interesting from your perspective when it's almost like you both have to kind of just end up seeing it. I don't know. It's an interesting perspective on that.
Yeah, you can sketch out ideas and work on your balance and stuff like that. But once those elements are on the page and you're pushing them around, and you're getting close to your balance and your composition of the layout, it can change. But when you see it and you get it, you're like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. I'm curious, just general idea of kind of how long it takes to get a watch made. Are we talking a couple months, a year? What's a typical time frame if somebody comes to you and says, I need a Simple Creatures watch soon?
So it depends, again, if there's an artist involved or it's just me or if it's half and half. It can take anywhere from, let's say, okay, so many variables. If an artist is busy juggling other projects and I'm part of that process, it can take weeks, it can take months. Sometimes I won't say the watch, but there's a watch coming out soon, and that took 5 months to make. And it's 3 months for production, actually get it physically, printed, assembled, shipped. But it was 2 months of design, going back and forth on the design, making adjustments, their schedule, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. People are busy and they're working freelance and they have other clients and things like that. It's rare as a company owner working with artists, it's rare for them to be your number one priority unless they're a retainer. Because in most cases, most artists are working on 3 or 4 projects at once.
Yeah.
And so, but if it's me working on a watch, it's usually, depending on my access to the band or the artist, it can be about a week or 2, and then 3 months for production. So we're looking at turnaround time, 3.5 months to 5 months, depending on what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
It's not too bad. I mean, they're real watches too. That's the other problem that I kick myself with all the time. I'm usually like, why couldn't I just have made a piece of shit, like throwaway thing that people are like, I paid $20. This is terrible. Throw it away. Because it's a real watch, it actually has to get real watch parts and has to get water resistant gaskets and all the details that I put in with the etchings on the crown and the back casing and the printing that I do on the crystal. Like all that takes extra time. If I just threw a graphic on the middle of the dial and it was boring and it came in a boring box, that'd be the easiest thing in the world. But heaven forbid I do something easy.
Yeah.
But again, I'm a fan, and the fans appreciate detail, they appreciate the collectability, and I'm a fan as well, so that's why I do it.
Cool, man. So, all right, I'm gonna get you out of here on some rapid fire questions. I appreciate your time. We've been going almost an hour. So,
question for you, real quick. So, how did you get into Blink 182?
Man, it goes back to 4th grade.
Really?
So, yeah, man. So I've told the story on the podcast, but I remember going to my buddy's house before school every day, and he had the Damn It promo CD. And I remember the CD like it was yesterday. The top of it was the single, the radio single, and it just said "Damn It" on it like 100 times. And I remember we would listen to it just nonstop. And I think what drew me to it, as I mentioned on the podcast, is at that time you're listening to kind of shit that's on the radio, whatever your parents are listening to, a bunch of like. My mom was always listening to like Christian music, just random stuff that I was not into. And I think why I was drawn to this is, all of a sudden I hear some guitars. I hear where he says, "Did you hear? He fucked her." So I just thought it was so cool that he's dropping.
Ooh, profanity.
Yeah, I'm like, profanity, guitars, people having fun, like cuss words on their CDs. This is cool. So that was my first introduction to Blink, man. Like Dude Ranch, 4th grade, and ever since then, man, it's just been, Enema. They blow up. Everybody knows them. Take Off, and then I think like a lot of people, I feel like I grew up with them. I just had a rad conversation with Nick Gensler, Terminal Radness, dope artist. And he had a great quote. That podcast will be coming out soon, but he had a great quote where he said that he kind of looked to Blink to figure out how to be cool, how to dress cool, how to act cool. So from kind of a culture standpoint, man, I've just always been such a huge fan and just always dug them. So throughout the years.
That was your first rock band. Like that was your first guitar rock band.
Yeah, man, that was my first like major introduction. Like it was basically like them and Nirvana. Were basically like, that's kind of what I grew up on, my main two like influences. And then I got into Rage Against the Machine, and then System of a Down, kind of into that kind of stuff. So but Blink has always been there, thick and thin. And then they had the side projects. I've always been down with Plus 44, Angels, Boxcar. So it's been a wild ride, man. I'm just so happy that, I think everybody's in a good place right now. Obviously there's a split fan base to some extent with, Tom going off and doing his thing, but I really think everybody's in a cool place right now where everybody's getting along. Tom can do his thing. I'm happy that Blink's continuing, totally down with them and the new stuff, and just can't thank any of them enough for the dope memories and experiences I've had over the past 5 years where, to be honest, I could have called it quits or just gave up or what. So
yeah. So when was your first Blink concert?
So my first Blink concert. So
did your parents take you, or did your parents approve?
No. So here's the problem. So they broke up, 2004, 2005, they're done. Well, I got my license in 2004 and my first job in 2004. So I never got to see them because I didn't have money or a car.
Oh.
So my first concert with any of them was actually Plus 44 in 2006. And I remember my buddy and I, one of my best friends who's the only other like hardcore Blink fan I know in real life. I remember us going to that concert and we thought that was going to be the closest we would ever see to seeing Blink, man. It was so special. And that's part of why I love Plus 44 so much, but they played What's My Age Again. They played Rock Show.
Wow.
At the show. So I'll never forget that. Just super dope. And then, the reunion tour, I finally got a chance to see Blink as one, once they got back together, which was amazing. And then I've seen them probably 15 to 20 times, probably 4 or 5 with Tom. So yeah, man. It's
So were they kind of like your gateway to pop punk or just music in general? I mean, it sounds like music in general, but did you get any other kind of pop punk stuff? Did you kind of dig back into their, did you follow bands that they were into? Did you?
I didn't get like super into like the bands that they were kind of influenced by. Like I know they're huge into like the Descendants, The Cure, stuff like that. And to be honest, I don't really dive into that stuff. I don't really listen to it. I was very much kind of listening to what was kind of coming out in my
So you
generation.
were going forward. You were moving forward.
I was kind of going forward, yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. So, and I listen to a wide range of stuff. I mean, it's not just pop punk. I mean, I listened from everything to like Lamb of God to like Bob Marley. I mean,
Yeah.
very wide range of music. Really, the only thing I don't like is country music. To be honest, I just fucking hate it. But I've got a pretty wide palette.
Okay. 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 Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, appreciate you asking.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw Plus 44, so that's pretty cool that you got to see him. Blink, my first Blink show was 1997 on the Warped Tour,
Wow.
and I had only Dude Ranch had just came out, and it was such a good show. I mean, they were fast, they were funny, the crowd loved it, and I was just like, okay, these guys are the real deal. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if I had a time capsule, man, I'd be right back in 97, 98 would be sick. And then my favorite Blink album is actually Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. So if I could see them in 2001, just slay that live. Whew.
What was it about that record that really resonated with you? Aside, I mean, because Enema of the States is usually the one that got people. Why?
Yeah.
Why
So
take?
Dude Ranch is kind of like it's kind of raw, they're finding their way. Enema comes out, and that's where most people get introduced to them. And I love Enema. It's awesome. They were on top of the world. Everybody knows them. I mean, What's My Age Again? Just amazing album, really iconic. But I kind of felt like I was growing up with them. And then when that next release comes out, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, man, I just really feel like it was basically the height of pure pop punk, and then a little bit of angst was starting to come in with kind of what ended up being, now we know, like that Boxcar Racer vibe, kind of
Oh,
dark vibes going in there. and
okay.
and Mark has said that there was starting to be a lot of tension on that record, and there was starting to be kind of a lot of competition between him and Tom on that record, and I think they just kind of bashed it out to where it's just fucking perfect, man. And
Oh,
I always judge the albums like not so much by the hits or the releases, but the second half of the album, or kind of the B side. And man, some of those, I just listened to that whole album today when I was running. I just can't get enough of it. But some of the latter half of that album, man, like Shut Up and Every Time I Look for You and Reckless Abandon and stuff like that, man, it's just it's so killer.
that's cool that you appreciated because of like a direction they were headed in, or a place that they were in. Because most times the record is special to people based on where they were in their own life and things
Yeah.
are happening with them. So it's kind of cool that it was more from a music standpoint where you're like, there's this animosity, there's this angst, there's a tension involved in the record. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I would never would have expected that. So that's cool.
Yeah, and Tom, Blink and Tom, and like I mentioned, Nirvana, stuff like that. They're the reason I picked up a guitar, man. So it was right around the time where I was starting to kind of, play my own stuff, and I could just, playing along with that album, dude. Like you can just feel it, like all the angst, when that shit kicks in on Stay Together for the Kids and stuff like that, man. It's just powerful stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It is. They put on a good show. Yeah. I'm sure they'll get back together one day. I give it 5 more years. I always tell Dylan 10 years. 10 years is all it takes. People get back together in that 10-year window, always. So I think we have 5 more years on it. And you guys, if it doesn't happen, you guys can call me out on it. So,
My
five more
my
years.
theory is, I mean, they're just now, like, really in the past couple of years, they're starting to be kind of cordial about it. Like Tom and Mark have kind of poked at each other on Instagram, and I mean, I love Skiba, I love Alkaline Trio, I love
For
this
sure,
new
me too.
era.
So,
And my theory is, right now everybody's in a pretty good spot. Like Tom, I mean, he just doesn't have time for Blink, and I don't think Mark and Travis want to sit around and wait on him to, practice when he wants or write when he wants. I mean, it just doesn't work out with kind of how they both envision it, obviously. But my thought is, I hope they continue with Skiba, for at least hopefully another album or two. And then I'm hoping maybe at some point Tom at least decides to do maybe a reunion tour of sorts. And I'd like to see them come back as a four-piece, to be honest, because I don't want to see Skiba get kicked to the curb, because he stepped in graciously and really has just been so rad to
Yeah, that's what I anticipate will happen, is that, they're going to do another album or two. Tom will come back in because he'll be nostalgic. He'll be missing it. He'll be missing the energy, the camaraderie, and there'll be a four-piece. Yeah, there's a reason for Matt to not be there. He's a great songwriter. Like you said, he's graciously stepped in and contributed to the legacy. And it'll probably be a four-piece for sure. Yeah, so you and I are playing on the same page with that. But yeah, I'd say 5 more years. Tom's been out. Look at it this way. Tom's been out 5 years. And they're already starting to make nice. They're already kind of flirting with each other online, and posts and stuff. And it's like 5 more years, he'll be back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It depends on if Tom finds aliens in the next year or two. That might.
Oh, that's true, man. Aliens might cock block us from our Blink reunion. That's true.
We'll know if aliens are Blink fans, or old school Blink fans, if they just pop down and say, "Hey, Tom, find me." Okay, go back to Blink.
Yeah, that'd be rad.
Your mission's done.
I'll make game to tell you, just go play music. Don't worry about us. Go have fun.
Only time will tell, man. I mean, if you would have told me that they would have broken up twice and the dude from Alkaline Trio would have stepped in, and I mean, I'm telling you, man, that's why there's enough content to have a Blink podcast, because it's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and like you were saying earlier, with all the side projects and the contributors and all the stuff that they're involved in. I mean, there is a plethora of things to talk about.
Yeah.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire, and then we'll get you out of here. So, favorite Blink song?
That would be "Waggy" on Dude Ranch.
Okay, classic. Favorite Blink album? I think I know this.
Dude Ranch, for sure. And that goes back to what we were talking about. Whether we appreciated musically or where we were in our life. And I think for me, it was. That record kind of came out of left field. I was a fan of Cheshire Cat, and I appreciated the fast songs, the humor in it. It was the rawness of it. And when Dude Ranch came out, I had this moment where I was like, oh, they're not serious, but they're evolving.
Yeah.
And sounds better, and the songs are great. And when I heard that record, I knew, it was like, there's at least 4 to 5 singles on here, and this band's going to be huge.
Yeah.
And then when I saw them on Warped Tour, I was like, oh, okay. So if regular people see this, not like the pop punk or the punk crowd or the Warped Tour crowd, when other people see this, they're also going to kind of be enamored at the fun and the playfulness and, the humor that they have, that they bring to a show. It was energetic, it was fun, it was playful, like I said, and I was like, I just knew that all these things were going to kind of come together for them. And the thing that registered for me is when Dude Ranch came out, I was working at a record store at the time, and I put that record on a listening station, and we would sell at least 20 of those a day.
Oh, dope.
I mean, and they were like, what is this? This is the craziest thing ever. And it kind of reminded me of like what you said, is like, I got the Damn It single and I listened to it, and it was guitars, and it was this thing, and something kicked in. And I think that's what it was for a lot of people that were there buying stuff, because there wasn't, in certain record stores back then, there wasn't much. I mean, there was Green Day to compete with and things like that. And I think certain people were kind of like looking for the next Green Day when they were buying records. Yeah. And there was probably other stuff, like Bad Religion was pretty active at that point, and No Effects. So I think, people there, and Pennywise, and people would come in, they would buy that, and then they heard that, they're like, oh, this is fun. This is, it's fun. It wasn't serious, but there's a couple of songs, that are serious, like Waggy, and it's kind of it's a great song. So that's the record for me. Intima State's also rad, and Takeoff is really good too. And but Dude Ranch is my jam.
Yeah. And obviously with all the Blink albums, what's so special to a lot of people is every single one almost takes them to a special place in their life. When I spin Takeoff, part of what I love about it is it just takes me back to that summer. When I spin California now, it takes me back to 4 summers ago, and just the memories, it's just so cool. So
yeah. And then also back to what you said about the style of music, and it was like, that to me was Cheshire Cat Part 2. It was cleaner. It was that same energy. It was almost like a better recording and catchier songs. And I was like, "Oh shit, this is insane! This is good. I can't wait to see what they do next." So it's rad to see what they did, and yeah, music's a fascinating thing. It sticks with you for sure.
Yeah, man. Advice for upcoming artists, business owners, entrepreneurs, whoever.
Stay committed. It's everything you're going to create or make in your life is probably going to put some stress or hardships on you, and it's going to be work and it's going to be tough at times, but just keep doing what you're doing, stay the course, always have integrity, do things with heart, and you'll always be happy.
Cool. All right, last question. So we've already kind of both talked about our collections and vices a little bit, but what is the favorite piece of your collection that you have? Any collection? If your house is on fire, what are you going and grabbing, collectible wise?
My house is on fire. I got to grab 3 cats. Yeah, I would.
Are you on the first floor or second? Because you can throw them out the window and then grab this.
Second floor, and the trees outside I have overgrown, so I probably could toss them out there, and they might grab a branch. And technically they are supposed to land on their feet. So yeah. I think a couple of the signed watches that I have, I would take. I would have to take my laptop. But if it was stuff that I collect, it would be some of my signed stuff. I would take my autographed Motorhead watch because it's signed by Lemmy and he's dead.
Oh,
yeah, I would take that. What else would I take? Probably some of my autographed watches. I have a Blink watch signed by Mark, Tom, and Travis. I take that. My Motorhead.
Sick.
What's another one? My autographed Bauhaus skateboard. I would take that because getting them to autograph stuff is next to impossible. Not that they're difficult, but they don't sign a lot of stuff. What else? I think that's it. I do have a couple of comic books. That's not one thing. That's everything.
Yeah.
I'd be running out the house. My hands would be full. Yeah, it would. Yeah, but
you'd be dying in the fire.
I'd be dead. I would still be deciding what to get, and I would be dead in the fire, holding stuff, and they'd be like, "What did he try to save?"
He died doing what he loved, grabbing his Bauhaus skateboard.
Is that an autographed Blink watch? No, he should have just ran out the door. What was he thinking? But yeah, it's I don't have a lot of stuff. I've sold off a lot of my archives, but I do have a handful of pieces that I collect. I've saved, and those are ones I look back with the most fondest memories because they were kind of just like anybody who collects autographs. There was a moment in your life, and just like music, we were saying, there's a moment in your life how the autograph either happened or how you got it or where you were at or what it kind of is emotionally attached to. So. Yeah. I would die in a fire holding things that were autographed. Yeah,
crawling out with a Bauhaus skateboard.
Yeah, they'd be like, "Is that a human?"
They're reading that at your eulogy. That'd be funny.
He died saving autograph stuff.
Cool, man. All right. Well, that's all I had, man. I really appreciate your time. This was super dope. So if there's not anything else you need to say, I think I'm cool wrapping it up.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.